I'm talking to you though. You're the stats guy.
Yeah, we're trying to.
You're the stats guy, and we're the homies.
What is up, homies? Some crazy things happening in the NBA right now, but I wanted to visit a subject that I've touched on in the past, but have never done a full analysis of, and that is pace. So I was listening the other day to some of, I think, Ryan Russillo. I really like him. And I would call him a numbers guy, not a stats guy. He loves to talk about the numbers. And in general, the numbers, or what you also might call descriptive statistics, can tell us a lot. But they don't tell the whole story. And I'm afraid that pace as a statistic is misunderstood, quite misunderstood. Yeah, so let's just get into it. So the way I hear pace talked about much of the time is that it's desirable and a higher pace is more or less better for your team. Obviously, there's some nuance to it and it's situational. So let's go through pace as a statistic first. So here's the formula for pace. Basically, it's the number of possessions in total divided by 2. And so it's roughly the number of possessions that your team has in a game. Yeah, that's it. For that reason, it cannot be used to look at an individual game, because for any individual game, both teams will have the same pace. It is useful for looking at a span of games or a season, because your pace over time will tell us if your team is faster or slower on average compared to other teams. So it's really a statistic that we can use to compare teams. I will also say that pace is sometimes presented as this very, very complicated statistic. When you look it up, you get many formulas that are based on, like, it'll take each player's possessions and then divide by the minutes for each player. So like some of them have like 240 minutes. That's all silliness. It is really, really simple. It's just how many possessions you had in a game. And then it's normalized by minutes the way that it is, just to account for overtime. So basically, overtime doesn't add any more possessions. You take the average possessions per 48 minutes. That's all it is. Okay, so the number one thing that surprised me a long time ago when I first looked at pace was the association between pace and winning. So it's talked about like more pace equals more winning, so that there is a roughly linear relationship there. Now, how impactful it is never really talked about, but basically you want higher pace. And that's the context I heard it in recently, was that this team was falling off because their pace was also falling off. That was sort of the gist. And that's actually not true. Typically from something like this, I would expect to see no significant association, right? I would expect that being a little bit higher or a little bit lower in pace wouldn't really make a difference on winning. That's why I didn't look at it too hard to begin with. But it does. It's just in the negative direction. So what I mean by that is, as your pace goes up, your winning percentage on average goes down. Let me say that again. As your pace goes up, your winning percentage goes down. Slower teams win more. Now, there's probably a multitude of reasons for this. Higher pace teams are probably younger. They probably are worse at defense. We're going to get into that a lot. And they're probably giving up more turnovers, which means more possessions in fewer time, that sort of thing. So it's complicated, but I worry that when people talk about pace, they don't understand what pace is telling us. They think it's telling us how fast you play. I don't think that that's what it's telling us, actually. And so I'm going to get into the specifics of that. So I mentioned the direction of the association, but specifically, if you take an analysis of the last 4 seasons, regular seasons, you'll find that adding 1 pace decreases your win percentage on average by 2%. So now that's not huge, right? Adding one pace is just adding 1 average possession per game, and minus 2%, that's like a little less than a win, a tiny bit less than a win. So we're not talking about anything groundbreaking here. But it does suggest that if you were to really have a playstyle that takes pace down, you might see a better return for your winning percentage. I don't know if that's true because, like I said, I don't think that's what pace is actually telling us. And the R squared on pace alone, just a simple linear regression, is only 7%. That's really low. And I would expect something like this to be a little bit higher than that. And so I dug a little further. And I found that if you account for the opponent's effective field goal percentage, the significant association of pace goes away. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, basically what that means is pace is at least somewhat approximating your defensive efficiency, right? If you just have pace, it's significant, but if you add something that approximates defense better, it goes away. So it's just a slightly worse proxy for defense. Oh, and by the way, opponent effective field goal percentage is a way better indicator of winning percentage. It predicts winning at about 40%. Now, that's to be expected. Opponent effective field goal percentage is a pretty good approximation of defense, and defense is half the game. So 40% seems right in line. And an advanced statistic like pace, I would not expect to be that high, but it's still low compared to where I would think it would be. And as a part of the equation of both of them, it's basically meaningless. I'm just going to sum it up. What I think is happening here is that pace is loosely approximating defense. So I think that pace needs to be rethought a little bit. And definitely we need to stop thinking about it in the direction that we are currently thinking about it. As your pace goes up, your winning goes up. That's not true. As your pace goes up, your winning goes down. I think that it's important that we think of it correctly. So next time you hear somebody talking about pace, take it with a big grain of salt and try to think about what they're actually saying about pace and if they're thinking about it correctly, because the numbers tell us that it might not be as desirable. And even if it is, it's only desirable or useful to us insofar as it's approximating defense.